So on behalf of the Care of Creation Office of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland, Eco Congregation Scotland, Justice and Peace Scotland, Laudato Si Movement, Pax Christi Scotland, Scottish Catholic Education Service, SCIAF, and the Scottish Laity Network, I would like to welcome you all to the third session of our Season of Creation 2025 series. As you know, the 1st of September was the 10th World Day of Creation, or World Day of Prayer rather, for the care of creation, and the theme chosen, as Pope Leo stated, by our beloved Pope Francis, was Seeds of Peace and Hope. At the beginning of his message, Pope Leo reminded us that Jesus often used the image of the seed. And as the time of his passion drew near, he applied that image to himself, comparing himself to the grain of wheat that must die in order to bear fruit.
Seeds are buried in the earth, and there to our wonder, life springs up, even in the most unexpected places, pointing to the promise of new beginnings. We can think, for example, of flowers springing up on our roadsides from seeds that landed up there almost by chance. As those flowers grow, they brighten the grey tarmac and even manage to break through its hard surface.
Leo also said that the following words of the prophet Isaiah would accompany us through the season of creation.
A spirit from on high will be poured out on us, and the wilderness will become a fruitful field, and the fruitful field a forest. Then justice will dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness abide in the fruitful field. The work of righteousness will be peace, and the work of righteousness, quietness, and trust forever. My people will abide in a peaceful habitation, in secure dwellings, and in quiet resting places.
And Pope Leo emphasised the need for us to be sowers of the seeds of justice, peace, and hope.
By working with love and perseverance, we can sow many seeds of justice and thus contribute to the growth of peace and the renewal of hope. It may well take years for this plant to bear its fruits, years that, for their part, involve an entire ecosystem made up of continuity, fidelity, cooperation, and love, especially if that love mirrors the Lord's own self-sacrificing love. Environmental justice, implicitly proclaimed by the prophets, can no longer be regarded as an abstract concept or a distant goal. It's an urgent need that involves much more than simply protecting the environment, for it is a matter of justice, social, economic, and human. For believers, it is also a duty born of faith, since the universe reflects the face of Jesus Christ, in whom all things were created and redeemed. In a world where the most vulnerable of our brothers and sisters are the first to suffer the devastating effects of climate change, deforestation and pollution, care for creation becomes an expression of our faith and humanity.
Let us now pause and pray for a few minutes that the Spirit from on high that Isaiah spoke of will open our minds and hearts to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, marginalised and excluded.
Veni Sancte Spiritus, 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 Veni Sancte Spiritus.
tonight, we welcome as our presenter Anne-Marie Clements, who is the Catholic Social Teaching Engagement Officer for Justice and Peace Scotland. One of her many roles is to work alongside colleagues at the Scottish Catholic Education Service and SCIAF in supporting Laudato Si schools. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, June. Okay, everyone, I'm just going to try to share my screen, which we did rehearse moments ago, so hopefully all should work. I have multiple monitors going on, you see, so I'm making sure that you see the right one. Okay, could someone let me know that that's how it's supposed to be?
Yes.
Perfect, because I can no longer see you now. So if anything's not right, if someone shouts out, that would be great. Okay. So good evening. As my colleague June has said, my name is Anne-Marie, and I am the Catholic Social Teaching Engagement Officer at Justice and Peace Scotland. I'm not here tonight specifically to talk about Justice and Peace Scotland, but I think I'll just give a very quick, you can see our logo down here. I'll just give a very quick overview of who we are and what we do. I know there are plenty of people in the room who are familiar with us, but for anyone who is not, Justice and Peace Scotland is a commission or an agency of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland. So that means that the work that we do, we carry out on behalf of Scotland's Catholic Church and of course our Catholic bishops as well. We have a remit to educate, advocate, and campaign on issues related to international peace and non-violence, human rights, social justice, tackling poverty, advocating for refugees, people seeking asylum, and people who are migrating, care for creation, and climate justice. So a lot, a lot to be getting on with, and one of those areas, as I said, is care for creation and climate justice. So it's really nice for me to be here with you all this evening during the season of creation to talk to you about a joint initiative of Justice and Peace Scotland, the Scottish Catholic Education Service, and SCIAF, and that is Laudato Si Schools, or Laudato Si Schools Scotland. So really what I'm going to do tonight, I'm not sure in terms of, who's in the audience that who'd be familiar with the programme, who is from an education setting or who's just interested really to know, I guess, what is happening in our Catholic schools regarding Laudato Si and care for creation. And I imagine that the majority of the audience is probably the latter. So really the goal of the webinar is for me to exemplify to you not only during the season of creation, but also during our season of being pilgrims of hope, the stories of hope and the tales of hope of how care of creation education is thriving in our Catholic schools in Scotland. So the way in which I will do that is I will give an overview of what Laudato Si Schools Scotland is, and then I'll give various different examples of activities that ourselves at Justice and Peace, SCIAF and SCIAF have been involved in, and I'll give a few examples of some of the workshops that I would host in schools. That's not that I'm just promoting myself, but my SCIAF and my SCIAF colleagues aren't here, so since I've got the platform, I might as well. So I will say a little bit about some of the stuff specifically that Justice and Peace do through Laudato Si Schools. And I guess, if anything here interests you, it's really important for you to note that one of the elements of Laudato Si Schools is that when a school signs up to the initiative and becomes a Laudato Si school, one of the things they're encouraged to do is to connect their ecological education, their ecological spirituality, etc., with their home life and with their parish life. So it's not just something that's in the school, but it is in the wider community. So even, as I say, if you're not from an education background, you'll still find this relevant in two ways. Number one, as I already said, just as examples of seeds of hope, of good things that are happening in our Catholic schools in Scotland, and that's always good to know. And the second thing is just to find out about this in the hope that maybe you, your parish group, if you have a care of creation group, a Laudato Si group, or just if you're an interested parishioner, or if you have a child or grandchild in a school, find out if they're a Laudato Si school and how can you connect with them? What could you do in parish? I'll say that again at the end as a reminder. And also, if people want help on how to make that connection, or if people want help on, okay, great, I'd love to connect with my local school, but then I don't know what to do. What can we do in the parish together? We would certainly be able to offer lots of insight and ideas on how to help with that. So, like I said, I'll say that at the end. But hopefully, those are the two things that you will get from this. Okay, so. Laudato Si Schools, then, obviously, it is in the title, is based on Pope Francis's groundbreaking landmark encyclical, Laudato Si. And I'm sure everyone here is a fan of Laudato Si. That's hopefully why you've come along and signed up for tonight's webinar. But I think I've just put a few things up here that I guess encapsulate what the Laudato Si encyclical is. And usually, if I was going into a school to speak to young people about Laudato Si or to do a Laudato Si schools workshop, for example, these are the sort of main points or things I would try to highlight for them. If there is anything there on the screen that you think is missing in terms of the message of Laudato Si, I would love you to pop it in the chat, because obviously I can then incorporate that into what I then take out to schools. Because as you can imagine, when you go into either a primary school or a secondary school, certainly what I find is that most young people either have heard of Laudato Si, right? So they are a Laudato Si school, they've heard of Laudato Si, and they are doing ecological education, and they know that it's a message from Pope Francis, etc. But that's usually about it. I don't think that they're fully familiar with the content. Or in some instances, if they're just starting out on their journey, they might not be familiar at all. So these kind of 6 things that are on the screen are things that when I go out to a school, I like to try and get across as, if I wanted a young person to understand what Laudato Si is all about, these would be the main things that I would want them to know from an introductory perspective. So like I say, if you think there's anything missing, then please share it, because I can always incorporate that. So these are, as I say, the main messages of Laudato Si, and I hope you would agree with me that Laudato Si will be an enduring legacy of Francis' papacy. I would say there'll be two, certainly for me. And I'd be interested again at the end to hear what you think, but certainly there are 2 things for me that will endure and as a legacy of Pope Francis. One, of course, is Laudato Si, and the other one is his unwavering support and advocacy for refugees and for migrant populations. I think those 2 things were shining lights of his papacy, and things that I hope agencies like ourselves at Justice and Peace Scotland can continue to carry forward for a long time to come. So back to Laudato Si and Laudato Si schools. So the whole point of Laudato Si schools then is to take the message of Laudato Si and to package it or deliver it in a way where schools can live it out across the year and continuously beyond that. So what I've done here is just put a sort of a little bit of a summary of how it's structured and what its goals are, and I'll go through each of these. I'll go through each of these now. Okay, so some of them perhaps are more obvious than others, and others will need a little bit of an explanation. So the first thing, or the first goal really, is this one here, the purple one. And the purpose of Laudato Si schools is that when a school commits to becoming a Laudato Si school, and I'll say more about that shortly, we try not to use phrases like sign up and things like that. But when a school commits to becoming Laudato Si school, the main purpose of that is to create an environment of ecological education. And creating an ecological education, as I'm sure many of you will know, is one of the 7 Laudato Si goals. But what is really the underpinning of Laudato Si Schools Scotland is that Laudato Si Schools Scotland posits that creating an ecological education for young people is the thing that will then unlock and achieve all the other Laudato Si goals. Because particularly for young people, they need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. What is the context? What is the rationale? What is the justification for achieving ecological economics, for example, or for achieving ecological spirituality, or the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor? So the most important thing for the young people is to educate them on why that is important. So Laudato Si Schools really focuses on this one of the goals, as I say, as the key to unlocking all the others. What it also is, as I mentioned, we don't like to use the phrase "let's sign up." It's not something that you're doing to achieve or to win. It's not an award. Instead, it's an invitation to become stewards of God's creation, and that is as an individual young person and also as a whole school community. Um, and what's really important is that, with the accepting it as an invite, you are sort of taking responsibility, like you're RSVP and yes, but like I say, not in such sort of corporate or strong language as signing up. And I'll say a little bit more about the invitation aspect shortly. After the invitation or the goal to be the stewards of God's creation, the next thing is to develop and practice an ecological spirituality, so that the school is in their prayer life and in their liturgical life, they're linking in the themes of Laudato Si, because that's exactly what Pope Francis asked us to do in the encyclical, is that these things shouldn't be separate or exist in silos, but instead they should all be woven in together. And what is really important, and as I'm sure I'm preaching at the choir here, pardon the pun, but I'm sure many people here are advocates of the idea of making sure that our relationship with God is creation focused. And I think, to be honest, that's not something that when I was at school that I really had. So you had your sacramental preparation and you developed your prayer life and you learned about the liturgical year, the lives of the saints, all these really, really important things that are crucial to forming our knowledge, understanding and practice of our faith. But I certainly don't ever recall ever been taught or instructed. And to be honest, really, until Laudato Si, until I was an adult, on interlinking that with creation, and praying for creation as a whole, and recognizing that we can grow closer to God spiritually through our love and care of creation. And I know there are some people here on this call who do that and do that well, and certainly do it much better than me. So again, at the end, as well as having questions for me about Laudato Si schools, I'd love to hear some of your ideas and suggestions of things that I could take into Laudato Si schools as well. Grounded in Catholic social teaching, you would hope, since it's called Laudato Si Schools and Gospel Values. And there are various opportunities throughout the Laudato Si Schools programme to connect to wider church teaching as well, which links back to what I was saying earlier on, that these things don't exist in a silo, but there is other church teaching, there is other church beliefs and theology, there's other church prayers and so on that all link together, and that's really, really important as part of Laudato Si Schools. And these two here are more about how it's structured. So it follows a learn, pray, act model, where young people are asked to learn about the encyclical. They're asked to then connect it to this wider church teaching and gospel values, etc. They're then given opportunities to pray, whether that is in class, whether that is through significant events in the liturgical year, whether that's through assemblies and prayer services in their local parish, for example. And as well as praying, and then the final step then is taking action. And there is a whole plethora of things that schools do in order to act on becoming Laudato Si schools. And I'm going to give you some examples of them shortly. And once they've gone through this learning and praying and acting, they're asked to then continue to do that. So it's a cycle that repeats itself. And that's what I was saying earlier on about it's not an award whereby you meet an X amount of criteria and then you get to level 1 Laudato Si school. And then for your next academic year, you meet more criteria and then you get to level 2 Laudato Si school. It is purposefully created not to be like that, and instead it's a cycle. So every year the school learns, prays and acts again and learns, prays and acts again, but there's never sort of things to tick off or criteria to fulfill, so that it doesn't really become a thing that once it's done, it's done. And if you have more questions about that and the logistics of that, then please ask. And once you get into that cycle of continuously learning, praying and acting, then you as a school have changed for good. And that's the goal, really, that Laudato Si and the values of Laudato Si schools, ecological education, ecological spirituality, are interwoven throughout young people's learning and teaching experiences and throughout the whole life of the school. So that's it very much in a nutshell. For some of you will be familiar, colleagues that are on the call, the Laudato Si schools folder is huge. So I think that's very much a very brief summary and overview, but hopefully enough to give you a flavour of what it is. And how it's structured. And I said already that it's connected to the Laudato Si goals, which I have up here. I won't go through all of these, but throughout the programme. So basically, schools are given a resource pack that's connected to different Laudato Si quotes and different Laudato Si goals. And throughout the programme, they are given ways to explore all of these goals, with the overall aim being the achievement of the ecological education, like I said earlier on. And if people are interested in seeing some examples from the resource pack, I do have them here, and I can share them separately at the end if people would like to see anything. Okay, so how is it implemented? That all sounds a little bit abstract. So the first thing I said is that schools are invited to become a Laudato Si school, and they accept the invitation, as it were, by contacting SCIAF, the Scottish Catholic Education Service, and SCIAF send them out the resources that they need, and the school are asked then to have a service of commitment within the school. And they're encouraged to bring in their chaplain or people from the parish to do that. So right from the get-go, we're getting that sort of whole school community effect. And they have the service of commitment within the school. And this is really crucial. And where I would say Laudato Si differs from any other scheme that you can do in school is that as soon as you have done that service of commitment, you are now a Laudato Si school. So it doesn't matter if as a school community you've never explored the encyclical before, or if as a school community you have eco-education and sustainability learning, gold stars for those things. It doesn't matter where you are on that journey. You become the Laudato Si school as soon as you have the prayer service of commitment. And that's what I actually really like about it. Because it doesn't have the criteria, and for some schools, working through these award systems just sometimes isn't possible in terms of resources and staff and what's required. So right from the very point that you say the prayers together as a community, you're now a Laudato Si school. And however long your journey takes you is however long it takes you. And it's designed to be flexible like that. Because what's really, really important and what was felt by SCIAF and the agencies at the time is that this didn't become another thing that teachers and schools felt they had to do. Instead, it's something that's meant to, as I say, sit there and underpin or complement the things that already exist. So a really good example of that, if anyone is familiar in education settings, you get the UNICEF Rights, Respect and School Award, for example, which is where children learn about their rights, and the UNCRC and all those things. And there are sort of bronze, silver, gold categories for that. What the envision would be with Laudato Si schools is that while they are doing rights respecting skills, they can weave in Laudato Si. Or while they are doing something else, they can weave in Laudato Si. It was very much designed to be that way. So you're at Laudato Si school as soon as you start doing that, and then you have the flexibility and the time to build that up as you want. The main part is the Learn, Pray, Act, and then the Changing for Good. And I've said a little bit already about how that works. What I thought would be nice to get us into the spirit of Laudato Si schools. I know that you're on mute, but you can just read this along with me as I say it. This is one prayer from the commitment service that every school takes once they respond to the invitation. So once they receive their resources and decide to be a Laudato Si school, this is one of the prayers that will be said at the service. And I thought that would be nice for us to respond to that invitation together this evening. God of all creation, your spirit dances throughout the earth. You give drink to the trees, shade for the birds, and bread for the hungry. You bring life and make all things holy. Flood our hearts with your grace, so we may sow seeds of love, justice, and beauty, and reflect your kingdom here on earth. We ask this through your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. So now, for the sake of this webinar, we've become a Laudato Si school because we've responded to the invitation and we've said the prayer. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is give you some examples of how the Learn, Pray and Act works out in real life. And as I said in the introduction, these are intended to be examples of stories of hope or ways in which care of creation education is really thriving across Scotland. So I've tried to choose a variety of different examples. This first one comes from the cluster associated with Lourdes Secondary School in Glasgow. So recently I was invited along there, so all the associate primary schools met in Lourdes Secondary and they had an Earth Day and they were asked to bring along all their learning for sustainability work, all the Laudato Si skills work, whatever they were doing in those areas, and showcase them to one another. And what I really, really liked about this event was that young people very much took the lead. And young people went round one another's stalls and rotation, and they taught each other about the things they had been doing in their school and how they had been putting ecological education and Pope Francis's words and wishes into practice. So you can see here on this little gallery here, this school have planted apple seeds, and each class got a plant to love and to care for. And you won't probably be able to see this too well. But this is a photograph of their Stewards of Creation group. And that's one thing that I've seen a lot in schools recently, particularly with the introduction of Laudato Si. That in our Catholic schools, instead of having an eco group, they are having things like a Care of Creation group or a Stewards of Creation group. And I think that's really nice, and it certainly gives the prayerful and spiritual identity to the work that they're doing. Um, you can see here, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but what this model is here on the table is this group of young people designed a sustainable, energy efficient building, house, shelter, whatever it was they called it. And they were explaining to me when I was there, so where the circle is here, you can see little blue bits. They were saying this was the solar panels they put on the roof. And they were showing me over here an area where you could store your crops at certain times of the year. And I was just really fascinated by the amount of thought and critical thinking and stuff that had went into it across this whole little model village they've created that was all sustainably modelled and sustainably built. But one of my favourite things from this day was this prayer here, which I'll read out to you in just a second. But you won't be able to see too well here, but on this poster, young people have written things like stop using plastic. They've got a red cross through a plastic bag. Use less electricity to save the world, etc., etc. But as I say, my favourite is this here, which says, "Dear God, what kind of world do we want to leave? A beautiful land with lots of grass. Keep the pond clean and new. Amen." And if there's anything that we could take away from tonight's Laudato Si Skills webinar, it can be that small prayer for a beautiful land with lots of grass, for the water is clean. And I think that and you can see by the writing how young the person is that has written that. And I think that's a real inspiration of hope for us. I was speaking to Rab about what do you think people tonight would want to get out of this presentation? And he said to me, the idea that young people haven't yet given into cynicism that we get so much when we grow up. And why do you bother with climate change? And why do you bother with the environment? And all, Laudato Si is airy-fairy. And I think that this little prayer just summarises that or encapsulates that beautifully, that young people haven't given into cynicism and we can certainly learn from them. It's not always us, or it's not always them, sorry, that have to learn from us. Okay, so another thing that we try to do, the agencies, so SCIAF, Justice and Peace and SCES, we put on a Laudato Si Learning Festival. And the last time that we did that, we brought together primary pupils, secondary pupils and teachers together in the one room and did a workshop for everybody. And rather than splitting people up yeah, keeping people apart. And what you can see here up in the top, the top, what's my top right, is I went into this school. This is pupils from St Eunan's Primary School in Clydebank. And I went in there and did some work with them on a Justice and Peace resource that I do for Laudato Si schools called The Journey of a Cotton T-shirt. And it's all about getting young people to think about, where do my clothes come from, who makes my clothes, and what impact do my clothes have on the environment. And the reason why I do that is because when we think about Laudato Si, we often think about ecological approaches. We often think about things like I was mentioning earlier on, about less electricity, less plastic, care for the environment, all of those things. But I don't think that young people are fully yet making the connection between that and like the stuff that they own and the stuff that they buy and consumerism, etc., etc. And what's really important for myself at JNP and for colleagues at SCIAF is that the resources that we are offering to schools are all different, so that a school can come to SCIAF and get one thing and a school can come to Justice and Peace Scotland and get something else. So SCIAF have really excellent resources on other Laudato Si areas like the Cry of the Earth and the Cry of the Poor. on things like sustainability, whereas I thought, what's missing here is this idea of consumerism and waste, etc. So that's where the Journey of the Cotton T-shirt workshop came from. And what I did with these young people in St Eunan's was I delivered it to them. And then at the Laudato Si Learning Festival, which was attended by schools and dioceses all across Scotland, the Primary 6 Care of Creation group from St Eunan's then presented the Journey of the Cotton T-shirt workshop that I had taught them to the attendees of the Laudato Si Learning Festival. And that was a great achievement for them, and also something that I was quite proud of too, to be able to help them to facilitate that and pass that learning on to others. And if you're wondering, what is the journey of a cotton t-shirt? The workshop involves getting young people to understand the life cycle of the stuff that they buy, that your t-shirt doesn't just appear on the hanger in a shop where you buy it, but there's a whole history and story behind it. And again, I know people here will know a lot about that, but I just wanted to as I say, share with you that what we're sharing with young people in order to inspire them in the words of Laudato Si, the way of Laudato Si, I should say. So we talked to them about where does cotton come from? What are the human rights, environmental costs associated with that? And where is your clothing manufactured? And in particular, we really focused there on the human rights implications of the fast fashion industry. Where our clothing is packaged. So the model that I use here is for a well-known high street brand who are headquartered in Spain. So once their clothing is manufactured in Southeast Asia, before it comes to the market in our own in shops in the UK or whatever, it all goes through their distribution centre in Spain, which is like another unnecessary stage in the process of emissions and plastic and all those things. So I talk to young people about all those things. And then really crucially, what we do as we give them the chance to plot that journey on a map. This is the worst photograph of me ever. I've ever snapped that. I've got my eyes shut. It's not the best, but you can see how the journey of the cotton t-shirt sort of plays out in the classroom setting, where young people are asked to guess where they think these things will happen and plot it on a map, and then we go through the story together. And by the end of it, they look at the map and see that their t-shirt has been to nearly every continent in the world by the end of its life cycle. Now, what is relevant here in terms of Laudato Si is that I could be coming in from any agency delivering that workshop. But what we have to do in order to link it back to the message of Pope Francis is ensure that it connects to one of the quotes from Laudato Si Schools. So there are 12 quotes in Laudato Si Schools folder altogether that have all been chosen from the encyclical. And the idea is that these 12 quotes will allow schools to plan various learning and teaching experiences, various community activities that will allow young people to fully understand and live out Laudato Si. So as well as doing the journey and the map and the plotting and all those things, we then link it back to this quote from Pope Francis, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with, that says, "Purchasing is always a moral and not simply an economic act. This shows us the great need for a sense of social responsibility on the part of consumers." And what my goal is really to impress upon young people that the social responsibility lies with you. You do have agency in this chain. You know, you can buy less, you can use what you have, etc., etc., etc. And we talk about that too. So that was one of the things we did at the Laudato Si Learning Festival. But another thing that we did there was we invited along, I'm sure you will be familiar, some of you, Les West Laura. And what was really great about inviting her along, so she's a Scottish environmental influencer for anyone who is not familiar. What was great about inviting her along was that young people were able to see a face that they probably recognised from social media, and she came along to talk in the setting of Laudato Si Schools, which was just brilliant. And what she did was she spoke to them about her campaign to ban disposable vapes, which has been successful. And what I really thought was so beneficial about this was that young people were able to take the idea of Laudato Si and apply it in a very real world context, and also see how you can achieve positive results in a very real world context too. So again, this is to give you a little bit of a variety of some of the things that we talk to young people about, some of the skills that we help them to develop. So one thing that Laura did was she gave them tips on how to campaign and how to campaign successfully. And all of these things ensure that there's a real holistic approach to Laudato Si Schools in Scotland, but all of it is always underpinned by these Pope Francis quotes or by the 7 Laudato Si goals. Okay, so there are a variety of creative possibilities, and there is no thing that you can't link back to Laudato Si. I'm sure many of you will know, I don't even know if she's on this call, Eileen McQuaid. And Eileen McQuaid said to me a couple of years ago, that people need to move away from thinking Laudato Si is only about gardens and the environment. Laudato Si is about everything, the whole of creation, and Laudato Si schools is very much like that too. There is no end to the possibilities and things that young people can do in order to continually be part of this learn, play, act cycle, and in order to change for good as a Laudato Si school. So I just have a couple of things then to finish on. A couple more examples just to highlight that. The diversity of things that young people are doing across Scotland and connecting it back to Laudato Si. So the first example I'm going to speak about is this one here, which is from St Catherine's Primary in Paisley. And they have a Laudato Si citizenship group, and they have organised or set up, sorry, a Laudato Si garden. They have created and stocked bird feeders, and they have educated their whole school on Laudato Si, on care for creation, etc. And they're through their Laudato Si garden, they're helping their school colleagues and their wider community to engage with nature, and they underpin that with prayer and spirituality as well. This one over here shows how Laudato Si schools can be connected with other areas, so it doesn't just exist on its own. St Edward's Primary in Airdrie actually won an award for a joint project with Keep Scotland Beautiful, which was focused on STEM initiatives, so science, technology, engineering and maths. And you can read the story there for yourself, but it says the aim of the event was to create a design which can help reduce marine pollution in the River Clyde. We are thrilled to announce that we won Best Investigation and Most Sustainable Solution at the award ceremony. Although it seems when they were writing in with their update, they never told us what the Best Sustainable Solution was. If anyone knows anyone from St Edward's Primary in Airdrie and could tell us what it was they won the award for, that would certainly inspire us with our Laudato Si journeys. So maybe I can find that out and report back. So yeah, the purpose of these two examples again was just to show the different things that young people are doing. And I would like to end with this example. So at the Bishops' Conference, we have a Care of Creation office. I know there are people here who are members of that. And Justice and Peace Scotland, SCIAF and SCIAF all send one representative along to the Care of Creation office, so we all collaborate and work really well together. And one thing recently the Care of Creation office has launched is From God's Hands We've Received a Garden, which is a garden competition where they're asking schools to create just that, a garden space the school community can enjoy. And this competition is very generously sponsored by the Knights of St Columba, who give a prize to the winning school, and also a running-up monetary prize to the second school as well. So we started the competition in 2024. And the idea is that whichever school wins the competition, which is judged, June is here. She can tell us the intricate workings of the judging process. But once the winner is decided, the idea is that the school will be presented with this Care of Creation trophy by their local bishop. So the inaugural winners in 2024, you can see them pictured here at Our Lady's Primary School in Perth, and they're presented with their award by Bishop Andrew Mackenzie. And in 2025, this year's winners were St Columba's Primary in Cooper, and that is also the same diocese. So I don't know what's going on in Dunkeld, if they're really good at gardens or they love Laudato Si. I don't know, but two great stories coming from that diocese, and another really good example of how we can grow and nurture care for creation, ecological education, ecological spirituality in our schools. And what is really great about this initiative is the idea that it is the bishop that goes out to present the award, so that young people are getting that connection between the sort of environmental stuff they're doing in school and how that connects to their faith and to the life of the church. So hopefully then all of these things have done what I said they would do, which is to be examples of seeds of hope and stories of hope of things that are happening across our country in terms of Laudato Si in our schools. And hopefully it has illustrated the things that our agencies are doing in order to promote care of creation in Scottish Catholic education. As well as that, I said that I would touch on this at the end. So I just want to remind you that in Laudato Si Schools, part of the changing for good is engaging with the wider community. So if you have been inspired by this, if you think this is a good news story, this is great to see what young people are doing and you would like to be involved, please find out. You can approach your local schools and ask, are you a Laudato Si school? Is there a way that we can connect through community, parish, etc.? If you're not sure how to do that, or if you don't sort of have the means to connect with your school, you can contact SCIAF, you can contact one of the agencies, and we'd be happy to help you do that. And then, like I say, if you are looking for ideas or inspiration as to how you can do some joint parish school activities, we would be more than happy to help with that as well. So I'm open to all questions about how Laudato Si Schools works, maybe what some of the quotes are, some what activities people do, any suggestions you have for things that we could do with young people. And I'll hand back over with just a small plug to follow Justice and Peace Scotland on social media if you don't already. And thank you very much for listening. I hope, as I say, you found that inspirational and useful. And I'll stop screen sharing now and we can have a discussion or ask questions if people would like to.
Thanks so much, Anne-Marie. We now have the opportunity to ask you questions and have a conversation. Marion invited you all to put in, share comments or ask questions in the chat box, and she'll ask the questions and share the comments.
Thank you very much, June, and thank you, Anne-Marie. That was terrific. That gives us such an overview of this project. And as the chair of Pax Christi Scotland, I've got to say that, peace and the environment for us are inextricably linked. So it's just so good to hear what you're putting into schools. And I think Rab and I have got, we're thinking along the same kind of lines here, because Rab says, what feedback have you received from parents? Has it motivated them to get involved in Laudato Si type initiatives? And I was wondering, while you were talking, is there one thing that you would say to adults that we could do that would make us better role models for children in our homes and in our parishes?
Yes, I'll start with that last one, I think. And this, of course, is not a accusation to anyone here, but it would be sometimes when we let the cynicism come in to not do it. And I think just to go back to that little prayer from that pit, it's just so innocent. It's just so innocent, what world I want to leave. A green world with plenty of grass where the water's clean, and I sometimes think if I talk about it for too much, I could start crying because of the innocence of it, and maybe that is where, we can try and be inspirational in that it can be hard. I guess what's harder sometimes for us as adults is that sadly we understand more about the injustices, we understand more about the things that are wrong, we understand more about the oppressions and the things that we would say, are not what we would want as people of faith, etc. So that can weigh us down sometimes, but to try and model that joy, I guess, which we find in the joy of the gospel, which is another Pope Francis encyclical, and just to try and to be hopeful, to try and be joyful, especially to young people. If we're lucky enough to have young people in our lives, to always nurture that joy, and maybe to always try to link that joy back to Jesus and to our faith as well.
There was some obviously beautiful artwork done by the kids in those projects in the schools that you showed us pictures of. And Sheila is asking, because I think that there is beauty and joy in the arts and poetry, Sheila is asking if you're aware of the Spirited Arts and Poetry competition run by the National Association of Teachers of Religious Education.
Oh, I'm actually not, but I'd be very interested to know more about that. I don't know, maybe if we could if she wants to send an email or put a link in the chat, even if there was any information about that, because that might be something that could then link into to the message of Laudato Si and things Laudato Si schools are doing, and they would
Absolutely.
may want to get involved in. Yes.
Perhaps Sheila would put a link into the chat for us. That would be great. And Liz has got a couple of questions that I found very interesting. This is who we've got here with us tonight, because she's obviously from south of the border. She said, is there an info pack and resources, and would she be allowed to use them in England, or is there an English equivalent? She's hoping to encourage her local parish schools, and she says, do the schools who have opted for Laudato Si use the practice of meditation? Which is an interesting question.
So in the last one, I'm not sure. So it would be up to you as a school to decide. There are such a variety of recommendations in the resource book for learn, praying, and acting, and also you also have the agency to come up with your own ideas. And and put those into practice. One thing I do know that might link a little bit to that question, is that we sometimes have parishes that will organise TASE services and then try and involve, their secondary schools, for example, in that. We did Justice in Peace, we did a TASE service in a parish last year, and we involved the local secondary school, in providing and playing along with the music and things like that for us, which was just lovely. And yeah, I'm sure if people are in agreement, I'm sure we will be in agreement that there is something so beautiful about a TASE service and linking that to creation, and it is a nice thing to do. In terms of the resources themselves, so the resources only available for schools, and when the school sort of contacts SCIAF, and makes the commitment to become the Laudato Si school, then SCIAF sends the pack out to schools. So Justice in Peace and SCIAF are sort of supporting agencies, but the main agency, who sort of oversees the administration and schools reporting and all that, is the Scottish Catholic Education Service. So if to answer the question about, sort of would there be anything available to use down south, I would contact SCIAF directly about that, and they would also be much better placed to answer similar initiatives in England and Wales. But as far as I know, there's not a national programme, the way that we have Laudato Si School Scotland as a national programme. As far as I'm aware, there's not that. But what I do know is that, I don't know if they're still available online, but the Diocese of Westminster had very good Laudato Si resources for schools on their website, as I've accessed them before, so that's worth looking to see if they're still there.
And perhaps somebody could put a link for SCIAF into the chat as well, because that might be helpful in many different ways from the people who are here this evening.
Yeah.
There's another question from Sheila, who I live in an area where there are no intensive farms, thank God. But I know that we do have those, certainly in parts of Scotland and very much in south of the border. And she says, do pupils consider care of animals in our intensive farms as well as wild creatures? And that's perhaps something, the states have such huge intensive farms and so on.
Sorry, that's the dog too. So
It's okay. Don't worry about the dog. The dog just wants to be on screen.
right, enough. So all things in creation are connected. So we just need to...
He obviously heard that and said, wait a minute, what about me?"
Oh my goodness. Okay, yes, so
in
The
terms.
The answer would be yes. So one of the things, in the again in the folder at the back, there are numerous resources that schools can use, prayers, ideas, papal quotes, saints quotes, and there's a big bit in there about St. Francis of Assisi and the Canticle of the Creatures, and all those things. And there schools would be very much encouraged, or young people would be very much encouraged, to make relationship and connections with creation as a whole. So yes would be the answer to that. And as part of the sort of the farming aspect of it, something we could do. I don't know how often this would definitely happen. Again, it depends on the school. The resource is so open to allow schools to interpret it and do what they want themselves. So it would depend on the if there's any expertise on this in the school. But another thing people could certainly do is look at sort of farming from sort of the climate change impact, and eating less meat. I know certainly in my own experience, what I have done before is as a whole class, got a whole class to sign up to do Meat Free Monday. But make it a fun thing. So we would look up recipes, and then they would then go home in the middle of the week for their parents for the following Monday. So here's something we could make on Monday. And then they would come into school on the Tuesday. So then what we would do would be on the Tuesday, you would have a report session where you would say, what did everyone have last night for Meat Free Monday? And but because we did it in that way, where we made it fun, it really, really, really took off. So yes, there is definitely options to do that. And then we connected that to obviously animal welfare and the climate implications of overconsumption of meat.
Yeah. A couple of questions that are quite linked here. Carol's asking how many secondary schools are Laudato Si schools, and Rab's wondering what percentage of schools are Laudato Si schools.
Yes. So we get figures like once a year. I don't know if June might be better placed to answer than me, or if she remembers. The majority of schools in Scotland are signed up to be Laudato Si schools. I know that for definite. And schools in every diocese are signed up to be Laudato Si schools. And the percentage is quite high. I don't want to misquote in case it's correct, but incorrect, sorry. The percentage is quite high. I just can't remember what the figure is off the top of my head. But it is certainly a majority of schools in Scotland have committed to Laudato Si schools,
And the
or majority of Catholic schools, I should say.
yeah, and the secondary schools, there's it's
Yeah. So primary and secondary. Yeah.
perhaps June would put any percentages if she knows in the chat. That would be quite useful, I think. Carol is asking if you could say something about Laudato Si and political education, how we influence our representatives in government to make changes, especially with older pupils. I mean, that's something that you and I in our organizations, we're very used to trying very hard to influence our representatives. Does that, the earlier people start, the better, I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, and certainly within the resource pack, so that all the suggested activities are differentiated. So it's the same resource pack that every school gets, but there's a variety of differentiated activities, for primary, for secondary, and to spark ideas. So yes, in secondary schools, young people would be encouraged or given the opportunity, if they wish, to contact MSPs or MPs or local decision makers about issues. Another sort of thing, a good thing to do, is what I said earlier on about sort of linking different school initiatives together. So oftentimes schools will have a Right for Rights Day, which will tie into their UNICEF Rights Respect in Schools, or Human Rights Day, for example. And a really good thing to do is to connect that to climate justice, so maybe getting them to tell stories to their politicians about a young person like me in somewhere else in the world experiences drought, famine, etc. because of climate. So there are different ways in which to do that. I would draw back to the Less Less Laura situation, where that was the goal of that, of getting Laura to come along, was to show young people how you can put Laudato into action through political campaigning. So Laura is Christian herself, so she did make reference to that during her talk, and that was the goal, as I say, of bringing her along, to show them that, as well as sort of the community care and the spiritual aspect, there is also the public engagement aspect of it as well.
That's very encouraging to hear, because as I said, I think that the earlier we can get young people thinking in those kind of along those kind of lines, the better. Liz is, I think you've kind of responded to this. Liz is saying, if you have any details about what's happening in the rest of the UK. I think we've kind of been there with England. I don't know if you know anything about Wales and Northern
I
Ireland.
don't, I just see June's stat there, and I was going to say 78%, but I thought I don't want to misquote, but June said as of 2023, 70% of Catholic schools in Scotland were Laudato Si schools. So I do now I think it's definitely higher than that now. So I think it might be 78, but we'll say 72 just to be really, really safe. But thank you, June. That is what I thought. It's definitely over 70%. So it's good to have that clarified so people know. And yeah, and in terms of England and Wales, yeah, I would do what I suggest. I would ask SCIAF, and I would also have a little look at the Diocese of Westminster stuff, and CAFOD have good stuff too, but obviously SCIAF have that up here as well.
And I think that possibly just simply contacting Catholic schools in England and Wales would be helpful. I don't know. I'm not in the education situation, but I think that if we can, the more we can find out about what's happening in different parts of the country. I see that Menchu is with us and gives some information there, and I know that Menchu knows all sorts of stuff because that's a name from Laudato Si that I recognize. So perhaps we could get some information from Menchu on the wider aspect rather than just the spirited arts information that is there in the chat. And Sheila has also given some as well. And we've got the percentages now. Now, competition is right. Well, I see that's about the spirited art, but the competition is shut. Now, you though are running different kinds of competitions within schools, and it would be quite interesting to know how they react to that. I mean, we saw some of the projects that I mean, the one with the model village was absolutely unbelievable. But who decides on those kind of competitions? Is it coming from Laudato Si? Is it coming from the schools?
So with I'll give my answer, and then I'll invite June, perhaps if she wants to comment. So the garden competition was an initiative, an idea from the Care of Creation office, and SCIAF communicate it out to schools. But the thinking behind it really was to to give schools a way to engage, or a motivation, if you like, to get involved with some care of creation activity, but in a way that is complementary to that cause, right? So that's why it's the garden, and schools have responded well to it. At the moment, it's a primary school competition. June will be able to say more about that, but it's just easier. It's easier for primary schools to get together and have a garden and do all those things. But also because it's only in its infancy, it's only the second year, so that's not to say that we won't expand it out. But we have been really pleased with the engagement and the response to it. And actually, I'm just getting my notes, because we had our winners, but we also had quite a number of highly commended schools, which gives an indication as to the quality of engagement in the entries that we received. It's just loading just now, but I don't know, June, if you want to say anything more about the garden competition.
Yes, can you come in, June, and tell us a little bit more about competition?
Sure. So as Anne-Marie said, I mean, it's very much looking towards sometimes people say, the children are the church of tomorrow, they're the church of today. So it's very much recognising the fact that they, we as adults should empower them to be the church of today and to take a lead in the environment and in care of creation activities. So not just the competition isn't just about, show us your garden. It's that the school have to provide evidence that Laudato Si is being talked about within the school, and that the work of the children is submitted as well. So it's an evidence-based judging. And it's certainly, I mean, I was very privileged to go out to Our Lady's Primary in Perth last year, and I'll be honoured to go out to St Columba's Primary in Cooper a week tomorrow. And just talking to the children, it's evident that they know the difference that they're making to the environment. And, somebody mentioned about the wildlife there, the fact that they have bird boxes and insect hotels and whatnot, so it's and then they also see the winners last year, the vegetables that they grew then went into the kitchen to provide their lunches. So it's very much, a community based. You would have seen from the picture Anne-Marie showed that the two police officers were involved as well in helping. So it's a real, so we encourage the schools to involve the wider community, particularly the parish community, but also just to say, right, okay, what is, how think of God's creation, and it fits very, very well with Laudato Si
Well,
schools.
I think that this is for both of you as well. Carol is saying, and it very much follows what you're just saying now, June. If we wanted to make links between parish and the local secondary school, is there someone in the school who would have responsibility for the Laudato Si program?
Very much so. And I think, certainly from the schools that have entered our competition, the best person to ask is the parish priest that goes into the school, because the chaplains, have a real role to play as well, So if you want to know if your local parish primary school is part of that, then all you need to do is ask.
Right.
Yes, and to add to that as well, every school should have a Laudato Si schools coordinator. So you can either, as June said, ask the parish priest if they're going in, if they're the chaplain, but you could say to the parish priest, could you find out who is the Laudato Si schools coordinator and then join up rather than you going in yourself and saying, who's the Laudato Si schools coordinator in here? If you get the parish priest, who, as June says, will be going in, and then you can make the connections that way. And then they would be the person to speak to about what you're doing in school, how can we complement it in parish, etc., etc.
Now, I'm feeling quite left out in this because here in Argyll and the Isles, we don't have, oh, and June, come back because this might apply, you might be able to answer this as well. Right, we don't have any secondary schools here in Argyll and the Isles, Catholic secondary schools, and we only have, I think it's 3 or 4 primary schools. Can we put Laudato Si into secular schools, primary and secondary schools? Is that a possibility, and how would we go about it in a diocese like mine that hasn't got the Catholic school framework?
June, do you want me? Will I go first then? See if
Yeah.
you. So again, SCIAF would be best placed to advise on that. And the reason I'm thinking that is because they're already used to knowing how they facilitate the Caritas Award for young people that are not at Catholic secondary schools, which I know you'll know about. So they will also be best placed to advise on how to incorporate Laudato Si schools as well for young people who are not at Catholic schools. And I could be misspeaking, but I can't see why it would be, you we want to help the agencies, right? We want to, to get these things out to people. So I can't see why, if young people were keen to do it, could there be another way? Even if that other way was Justice and Peace and SCIAF coming out to do something in the school, but it's on Laudato Si, for example, I would say that's definitely the obvious way in. Because SCIAF have Laudato Si workshops, Justice and Peace Scotland have Laudato Si workshops, and any school can invite us in, so we can then go in and talk to the pupils, whatever the background is, about the message of Laudato Si, care for creation, etc., etc. So that would definitely be a way to do it, would be to invite us out. But SCIAF might be able to offer a more structured way of doing that as well.
Yeah, I totally agree, but I think it's, in the setup, and it's not just a girl and the L's that wouldn't have, Catholic high schools. I think that, the Catholics that are teaching within those schools, if even they were to, be motivated by saying, well, more often than not, there'll be equal congregation or equal schools flags, certainly, in an eco schools environment, and that sort of award scheme that, I think if there are Catholic staff on the, in the schools, then they should feel free to bring in the whole idea of Laudato Si and of God's creation, because it's certainly, an encyclical that should be shared with others.
Gosh, yeah. Well, sometimes I think that it's better known by non-Catholics than it is by Catholics. That's sometimes the evidence that we get. I'm just looking here, some interesting stuff from, again, south of the border, that John and Ruth are saying that in England, CAFOD offers a Live Simply award to parishes based on care for creation and solidarity with global family. So that's something that we've learnt tonight from south of the border. And Liz is saying that she's going to write to our diocese Bishop of Leeds and get something going there. So what you've done this evening has going to have repercussions south of the border as well as here in Scotland. So is there, again, I go back to what we can do as adults. I think that's something that perhaps worries us sometimes, that we're not giving the right messages. We perhaps concentrate sometimes too much, as you've said, on the gardens and the plastic and whatever, and not the bigger picture. So perhaps you could finish off, both of you, or if I'm sorry I've involved you, June. If you want to opt out, do. But if you both like to give an answer to that, just how do we give the bigger picture, and we'll finish off with that.
Anne-Marie, you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. I think it just sort of goes back to maybe what I said right at the start, about continuing the legacy of Pope Francis, and I know it's not the theme of the webinar tonight at all, but I just think, given the current situation, to not mention the refugee situation, and how he was such a beacon of light and hope for people, and modelled to us how to dialogue, how to welcome the stranger, how to love our neighbour. All of that connects into care of creation. To go back to what I said during the presentation and what you've just said there, Marion, care of creation is about gardens, and it is about reducing plastic waste, and it is about reducing pollution, but it's about the spirituality of our whole relationship with the whole of creation. And I just think Pope Francis, showed us or shone the light on that for us, and it's up to us now to sort of continue to take that light forward. And it certainly sounds that Pope Leo is going to help us carry the flame. It certainly seems that way. And yeah, that would be sort of my final remarks, to be inspired by that legacy and the things that he said, the challenges that he laid before us. I mean, the Laudato Deum, for example, does not mince its words, but why should it? Why should we be airy fairy and hold hands when things are as critical as they are? So, to respond to the challenge that he laid before us, because we are the church, the Pope leads and guides the church, but we are the church and we can take that forward. And that would be my closing remarks, certainly, and how we can journey forward as pilgrims of hope, not just in 2025, but indefinitely.
And June?
Yeah, I would just echo that, but also say, I mean, more and more people are acknowledging the effects on Amazonian rainforests and the growing of crops being, depleted because lands are now becoming deserts and so on. So, to make that the environmental changes, yes, to acknowledge them, but it's really important to acknowledge the effect of the people in those habitats, and the effect, and we talk about the cry of the poor and they then become marginalised and so on, so there's a creation aspect, but it's very much a human impact as well. And just from those of you from England and Wales, we had a presentation by Bishop John Arnold, who I think is from the Diocese of Salford. And certainly, if you looked at Diocese of Salford for resources, I know that they are very rich in Laudato Si sources, so that might be a place to look at as well.
That's super. Thank you very much. And I would like to, of course, thank Anne-Marie for that superb presentation this evening. And I think we've learnt so much, but we've also we've got a great feeling of where we should be going. And so I'm going to hand back now to June. And thank you very much for letting me invite you into to some of that. Thanks.
Thanks, Marion. Thank you. And again, thanks to Anne-Marie for your presentation. There's clearly a great need to create an environment in schools for ecological education. And it's important that it's grounded in Catholic social teaching and gospel values so that the pupils are enabled and empowered to learn, pray and act. So thank you for that. I would like to finish by saying the Romero prayer for you and all those at Justice and Peace Scotland, for all our teachers and all who are involved in sowing seeds of justice, peace and hope.
It helps now and then to take a step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the Church's mission. And no set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything. And there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something, and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own.
As we go forth, let us reflect on the closing words of Pope Leo's message for the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation. Now is the time to follow words with deeds. By working with love and perseverance, we can sow many seeds of justice and thus contribute to the growth of peace and the renewal of hope. I pray that Almighty God will send us in abundance His Spirit from on high, so that these seeds and others like them may bring forth an abundant harvest of peace and hope. And so let us all go forth to plant seeds of peace and hope. Amen. I'd like to add my thanks to everyone, especially to Anne-Marie for her wonderful and uplifting presentation. We hope that you'll be able to join us next week for the final event of our season of creation, Eco-Congregations, Communities of Hope, with David Coleman, Margaret McPhail and Eileen McQuaid. So thanks again to everyone. Good night and God bless.